Welcome to Standing Up. Um, in practice, I do have certain concerns, and I think most of them come down to human nature. I think that certain hierarchical structures, they're natural, right? We created them because they were an efficient way to govern, and it seems to me, and I hope I'm wrong in my assumption, but it seems to me that let's say we take out there we find a way to live without government. It seems like it's only a matter of time before that power vacuum is filled, and the power vacuum is essentially just being able to benefit by applying force. So the government doesn't exist, they can apply force, but what can stop like Amazon or Google from buying soldiers and doing what they want to do to get their way?
Yeah, I think these are legitimate concerns, and um, well, let me answer that a couple ways. For one, I'll say the typical snarky sort of anarchist response would be something along the lines of, well, if you don't believe people are, if you think people are capable of violence and tend towards, that power vacuum and towards using might as right, well, then how can you say, not saying that this is what you're saying, but how could someone say, well, then we need a government made up of those same people,
Right.
right? And I think there's truth to that, but at the same time, it's a little simplistic of an argument to just kind of throw that out there and like assume that that answers all the questions, right? Because,
Right.
like you said, maybe throughout the generations, there have been some hierarchies that have formed in a natural way, and that because they're um, they just work out that way. And some anarchists out there, depending on again the school of thought, would say they're against all hierarchies, and that hierarchy goes against anarchism itself. Other anarchists I know, and I think I would probably put myself more in this camp, would say that if a hierarchy is voluntary and if individuals all consent to be a part of that, maybe that's like a workplace, right? Not everybody
Right.
can be the boss. There are some workplaces that are co-ops, right, and they work where people are more equal of fashion. Other times there are the boss, employee structure, and perhaps for those institutions in those specific cases, it works best, right? And so there are times where decentralization, I think, is going to be the preferred method, and then there's other times where maybe having more of a boss employee relationship, or some sort of hierarchical relationship might be better. So I think that's important to acknowledge. And the other thing I want to say is that these conversations do need to happen both between anarchists and non-anarchists to figure these ideas out, because the fact of the matter is that people all around the world are looking for solutions, whether that means, okay, they think they can reform government by voting, or they think, overthrowing the government with violence and things like that is the answer, or just simply opting out and pulling ourselves out of the system. At the end of the day, many of us recognize that things aren't working as we think they should be, and they're not working efficiently. Of course, we many of us diverge when it comes to what we believe are the solutions to these problems, right? But I can say that in the last year, I've made a very conscious effort to, get out of the anarchist bubble, I guess you could say. And not because I have given up any of my anarchist values. In fact, it's because of those values that I felt like I need to stop preaching to the choir and talking to people who already get this. And I need to go outwards. And that was one of the reasons, I know we're going to talk about this, one of the reasons I ran for mayor in Houston, where I live, because I wanted to make a conscious effort to reach people who aren't going to be at anarchist conferences, who aren't going to be on YouTube searching for this kind of content because they just haven't come across it. These are just regular people who are like, my house is flooding and I need somebody to help with that. And so because nobody is stepping up, well, not always, but let's say because they don't know that there are people in the community, anarchists and voluntarists and just activists, who are stepping up and trying to offer support, their first thought is, okay, well, the government must be the person I go to for help, right? And if we, say, the anarchists believe that a world without government is possible, but we do nothing to show people that, then the ideas are never going to advance. You know what I mean? You can write books and you can write essays and
Right.
talks and say, well, we're going to do these things and it's possible without government. But when people look around, that's not what they see. So they can only learn by what they experience, right? And so the average person is going to say, well, my house flooded, or one lady I talked to, she said her son had been hit by a bus and he got killed by a school bus, and she
Wow.
was like, why isn't the city or the school district helping me out? And I don't even know if that's the role of the government, but I could sit there and empathize with her and say, look, here's a human being who has a very realistic, tangible problem, and she's looking for help. And so as anarchists or as people who might not necessarily want to support or be a part of the system, if we're not taking concrete steps to show people that this world is possible, then I do think it will be difficult for people to ever come to terms and to think it's possible. And that power vacuum you talk about is a very real issue as well, because I mean, and I think I've shared this with you in past interviews. I was in prison 15 years ago when I was 20 years old. I got locked up for my own kind of going through things. And I met people there who generally do not give a crap about the rest of the world. You know, they're
Right.
sort of I'll say they're locked in their own trauma, and whether that means their trauma has led them to breaking into people's houses or committing acts of violence or stealing or whatever it may be, that's just where they are. And you can try to talk to them and have a philosophical conversation about empowering the world and bettering the world, and that's just not where they are. So let's imagine a world without government, and you have individuals like that. Those people probably would try to step into that power vacuum and um, you know gain some power. But even without that, you mentioned Amazon and some of those companies. We're already in a situation where those companies, like for example Facebook, not many people know, but they have their own private police force that guards their whole headquarters, and I'm sure Amazon can afford to do the same. These corporations are so large and so powerful that they can afford to hire Blackwater or other mercenary, private soldier groups to defend their property, to pretty much enact their will. And I don't believe that in the absence of a government, those companies are just going to disappear, right? So, as for me as an anarchist, I think we can't really talk about moving the ball forward in that direction without also addressing the fact that corporate power already exists, that does have the power to be the private armies of the future. And I don't know, I think there's a lot to pull out from there, but I do think it's important for anarchists, one, to get out of the bubble, to start talking to people that are just regular people, and hear what their concerns are and meet them there. Because if we're ever going to change the image of what it means to be an anarchist, it's only going to happen by engaging with the average person.